Over the past decade, there have been increasing issues in every major Western liberal democracy regarding immigration
and the associated effects of high numbers of immigrants in the US, EU, and the UK.
Why does the pressure to immigrate seem to be increasing? Most immigrants are likely motivated by multiple factors, including economic prosperity and escaping political tyranny.
But that doesn't capture it all.
The trip is dangerous for many, some drowning or being abused by traffickers. Why would people who love their children place them in harm's way to immigrate?
At least one reason for the timing, scale, tolerance for risk, and intensity of the migration crisis is that the US and its allies in the West have embarked on a series of interventions over the last 80 years.
And escalating that have created tremendous pressure to migrate from the global South to the North.
We submit to you that one of the dominant reasons for the current immigration crisis across the Western world is long-standing Western foreign policy.
That is, the immigration crisis is an unintended consequence of U.S. foreign policy intervention, with the support and assistance of the rest of the Western world.
This thesis applies to Haiti, where clandestine operations and natural disasters tell so much of its poverty and historical political instability.
Sometimes these actions are overt, just as the global war on terror's effect on the Middle East and therefore Europe. And sometimes it's covert, such as U.S. actions all over Central and South America and across the Caribbean.
Since World War II, Haiti has had 11 coups d'etats, or assassinations of its leaders.
The CIA overthrew the Haitian government twice in recent memory, in 1991 and 2004. The latter was an operation including using a bulldozer to get 154 gang members out of jail.
They would then go on to participate in a coup d'etat alongside CIA agents and assets of the U.S. foreign policy establishment.
This would create the backdrop of Haiti as a failed state until today.
Add to that the 2010 Haiti earthquake and terribly corrupt U.S. response, which funneled billions in aid through NGOs with little transparency or results, leaving much of the country in ruin while the political elite and international organizations mismanaged or siphoned off funds.
This compounded Haiti's poverty, fueling further instability and ensuring the cycle of corruption, crime, and immigration persists.
In Mexico, organized crime and violence are rampant, with 60 political assassinations occurring in the last election cycle alone.
U.S. operations such as Project Fast and Furious funneled 2,000 illegal arms and drug cartels, exasperating the violence.
Additionally, covert U.S. intelligence operations in Mexico have exploited drug sales to raise funds for CIA activities, making cartels more profitable and deadly than they likely otherwise would be.
So Mexico is unstable and violent because of the cartels, and the cartels are more capable and profitable because the U.S. foreign policy.
In Guatemala, U.S. interference stretches back to 1954, when the CIA-backed coup ousted a newly established anti-imperial government, fearing it might threaten American businesses' interests like the United Fruit Company.
This intervention and others plunged Guatemala into almost 4 decades of civil war,
leading to the deaths of 150 to 200,000 people under a succession of U.S.-backed military regimes.
Given these destabilizing factors, many Central Americans flee to the U.S., seeking refuge from the violence and political turmoil caused in part by U.S. foreign policy.
For Europe, the story stretches back to the 1960s, with the overthrowing of the democratically elected leader of Iran and reinstalling the Shah, all the way up to the intervention in Kosovo.
And even more recent wars of choice for the global war on terror to the very much provoked Ukraine war refugee problem.
Now, estimates are hard to be sure of, but according to international observers, 800,000 to 1 million people have been killed in direct combat during the global war on terror.
If you include indirect deaths, such as deaths from preventable diseases because the water treatment plant was bombed, the count could be more than 3 million.
And to be clear, Europe, you are not off the hook in blaming America for this. Many of these were encouraged by and supported by your governments through the EU and NATO.
The U.S. State Department has, in effect, purchased your government's endorsements of U.S. hegemony by saying the U.S. would protect you too, on the cheap, as long as your leaders backed them up politically. Your leaders took the deal.
We need our country because you fucked it up!
Few people in the West know and acknowledge Western culpability in the destruction of these countries in the prosecution of the global war on terror.
Just as few immigrants hold Western civilians accountable for the destruction of their home countries.
If any of us were from one of these countries, we too would want to immigrate.
We would prefer a way that didn't require decades of paperwork and waiting in our war-torn country.
Don't get us wrong, many countries have a rough time without U.S. and NATO intervention. But there's also no doubt that our leaders have exasperated and intensified the desire to get out of these countries and move someplace else,
even at the risk of their lives and the lives of their children. because they're likely to suffer or maybe die in the chaos created by our governments.
This doesn't mean we deserve the immigration crisis or that all asylum seekers should be let in unquestioned. But it does mean that if we want to curb the mass migration of people, we need a new foreign policy in the West.
One that is defined by restraint and realism, which calculates that nobody can know what the unintended consequences our actions will create. So we better be damn sure that the use of force is used only for the protection of our national existence.
Imagine for a moment, you could time travel back to 2002 and warn the world that NATO expansion would decimate Ukraine, bring us closer to nuclear devastation than any other time since the Cuban Missile Crisis.
You'd tell them that not only would the Taliban control Afghanistan again, but we'd be paying them hundreds of millions of dollars a month for some reason come 2024.
Imagine you could tell people the global war on terror would create ISIS and displace 39 million people in a never-ending war.
Some fraction of which would wind up at the doorstep of Europe, asking to be let in. And in compassion, Europe would do so.
Imagine stating the conditions of our world to the people then and asking if it's worth it.
Now, imagine someone came from the future to our time.
What would they say?